I zipped my boss's wedding dress with steady hands and a breaking heart, and when the last button closed at the top of that ivory gown, I leaned close to her ear and whispered the 4 words that would destroy everything she'd spent 14 months building. Your husband is not coming. My name is Cole Merritt. I'm a personal assistant. I press suits, manage calendars, reroute flights, and absorb chaos so that Sloane Whitfield, CEO of one of the most powerful firms in Atlanta, never has to feel the weight of a single disorganized moment. For 5 years, I have been the most invisible man in the most important woman's life. The one who knows which coffee she needs on which day. The one who stands 3 steps behind her in every room. The one who zips the dresses, carries the bags, and smiles when she talks about the man she loves. But today, in this bridal suite full of ivory peonies and champagne and every beautiful thing a wedding morning is supposed to be, I was the man holding a secret that was about to shatter her world. She was standing in front of the mirror in the most stunning wedding dress I'd ever seen, and I was behind her, watching her hands shake inside her bouquet, watching her eyes search her own reflection for something she couldn't find. And I already knew why. But here's what I didn't know. What does a woman like Sloane Whitfield say when the man she trusted with everything turns out to be a lie? What does a boss say to the assistant who knew the truth and waited until her wedding dress was fully zipped to whisper it? And why, when I finally said those words, did Sloane Whitfield go completely silent, turn to face me slowly, and ask a question that made my entire world stop? A question that told me she already knew something too. The bridal suite smelled like gardenias and hairspray, and something underneath both of those things that I couldn't name but felt like anxiety dressed up as excitement. The Atlanta skyline stretched wide and bright through the floor-length windows, all glass and ambition, which was exactly what Sloane Whitfield had built her entire life to look like from the outside. She didn't move after I whispered it, didn't gasp, didn't spin around. She just stood there, looking at her own reflection, and the only thing that changed was her breathing. It slowed down, the way breathing slows when someone shifts from feeling something to surviving it. I stood behind her, still holding the last button between my fingers, because I didn't know what else to do with my hands, and I watched her face in that mirror do something I had never seen it do in 5 years of watching. It went completely, utterly still. Not the controlled stillness she used in boardrooms when someone underestimated her. Not the quiet before she dismantled an opponent with 3 precise sentences. This was different. This was the stillness of a woman whose entire body had just made a decision before her mind caught up. She set the bouquet down on the vanity table, slowly, like it suddenly weighed more than she remembered. The white ranunculus trembled when she let go, petals catching the light, and then everything in the room was motionless except the dust floating through the sunbeams between us. Then Sloane Whitfield turned around, and she looked at me. Not the way a boss looks at an assistant, not the way a woman looks at someone who just ruined the most important day of her life. She looked at me the way someone looks at the only person in a burning building who actually knows where the exits are. "Cole," she said, and her voice was so quiet I felt it more than heard it. "How long have you known?" I opened my mouth to answer, but she shook her head slowly and held up one hand. And what she said next turned my entire understanding of the last 72 hours completely inside out. "No, don't answer that yet." Her green eyes held mine without flinching. "First, I need you to tell me something, and I need you to tell me the truth, not the assistant version of the truth, the real truth." My chest tightened. "Okay." She took one step toward me in that ivory wedding dress that cost more than my first car, in this suite full of flowers that were never going to see a ceremony. And she asked me the question that I had not prepared for. The one question I had not rehearsed an answer to in the parking garage at 5 in the morning. The question that made the room tilt sideways. "Did you wait this long to tell me?" she said, barely above a whisper. "Because you wanted to protect me? Or because some part of you didn't want me to marry him at all?" The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. The question hung between us like smoke from a fire neither of us had admitted to starting. I stood there in that bridal suite, in my pressed charcoal suit that I had chosen that morning, with the same careful attention I gave everything that belonged to Sloane Whitfield's world, and I felt the floor shift beneath me. Not physically, but the way it shifts when someone reaches into the version of yourself you've built very carefully over a very long time and pulls one thread, and you feel the whole thing start to come apart. Did I wait because I wanted to protect her? Or because some part of me didn't want her to marry him at all? The honest answer was that both things were true at the exact same time. And I had spent 72 hours telling myself the first one was the only reason, because the second one was a truth I had no right to carry in this building, in this room, on this day, standing behind the woman who signed my paychecks and trusted me with her calendar and had never once looked at me the way I looked at her when she wasn't paying attention. Sloane. Her name came out rough, unpolished, nothing like the professional measured way I usually said it. I found the certificate on Thursday night. I didn't sleep. I spent 3 days trying to figure out if I was reading it wrong, if there was an explanation, if Donovan had some reason that would make sense of it. I paused. There wasn't one. She nodded once, slow and deliberate. I know, she said. 2 words. And the entire room changed temperature. I stared at her. What? I know there wasn't an explanation. Sloane moved to the small settee near the window and sat down in her wedding dress like a woman settling in for a conversation she had been rehearsing for much longer than I had. She folded her hands in her lap, and the morning light caught the diamond on her left hand and threw it across the ceiling in 1,000 pieces. Because I found the same document 6 weeks ago. The air left my lungs completely. 6 weeks ago. She had known for 6 weeks. She had kept planning the wedding, kept finalizing the venue, kept approving the floral arrangements, kept sending me to coordinate with the caterer and the photographer and the string quartet. She had kept doing all of it for 6 more weeks, knowing that Donovan Chase was already somebody else's husband. Sloane. I could barely form the sentence. Why would you? Because I needed to know everything before I made a move. Her voice was calm, but it was the specific kind of calm that lives on the other side of something that is already broken. When you run a $40 million company, Cole, you learn that the most dangerous thing you can do when you discover a threat is react before you understand its full shape. Donovan wasn't just a man who lied to me. She looked up. He was trying to access my company, the joint accounts, the insurance policies, the post-marriage financial disclosures that my lawyers would have been required to file. She paused. He wasn't after my heart. He was after everything my mother spent her life helping me build. The bouquet was still sitting on the vanity table behind her, trembling slightly in the air from the ventilation system, and I looked at it for a moment because I needed somewhere to put my eyes while I rebuilt my understanding of the last 6 weeks from the ground up. She had known. She had stayed quiet. She had let Donovan believe she was walking toward him, and she had been collecting evidence the entire time. The wedding was never going to happen, she said quietly. There is no ceremony today. I canceled it 48 hours ago through my attorney. Donovan was served with a civil fraud complaint this morning at his apartment. A small, controlled exhale. He is not coming because he is currently sitting across from 2 detectives who are very interested in how many other women he has done this to. I sat down on the edge of the vanity chair across from her. Not gracefully, just sat down because my legs decided they were finished standing. You planned all of this, I said. Yes. The suite, the dress, the flowers. Yes. You're wearing the dress right now. Something moved across her face, something that wasn't quite a smile but lived in the same neighborhood. I paid for it. I wanted to wear it at least once before I donated it. She looked down at the ivory silk in her lap, and I needed to see what it felt like, to stand in it, to zip it up, to look in the mirror and know exactly what I was walking away from. Her voice dropped. I needed to grieve it properly before I put it away. That one broke something in me. Because that was Sloane Whitfield in a single sentence, the woman who processed loss in private and presented strength in public, the woman who cried in parking garages and never in offices, the woman who would put on the dress just to grieve the dream of it before folding it up and moving forward. The woman I had been in love with for 3 years while standing exactly 3 steps behind her. Why did you let me zip it? I asked, and my voice came out the way it did when I wasn't managing it anymore. Raw, unguarded, real. If you already knew everything, why did you ask me to button you in? Why not just do it yourself? She looked at me for a long, quiet moment, and then she said the thing that cracked me completely open. Because I wanted to see if you would tell me. Her eyes didn't leave mine. I've known about the document for 6 weeks, Cole, but I found out something else 3 weeks ago. Something I didn't learn from a lawyer or a private investigator. She tilted her head slightly. I found out from my best friend, who saw you at the records office downtown, pulling copies of Donovan's public filings, checking everything, cross-referencing every document he had ever handed me. A pause that lasted a lifetime. You had been protecting me for 3 weeks before you even knew I knew. Quietly, invisibly, the way you do everything. My chest hurt. You weren't just my assistant doing his job, she continued. You were the only person in my life who went looking for the truth, not because I asked you to and not because it benefited you. You went looking because you couldn't stand the idea of me being hurt. She stood up slowly, and the dress caught the morning light, and she was the most beautiful thing I had ever been afraid to look at directly. So I put the dress on, and I asked you to zip it, and I waited to see what you would do when you were standing close enough to tell me everything. She took a step toward me. And you told me the truth, she said softly. Even though it cost you something, I could see it on your face. It cost you something to say those words. I stood up because sitting felt wrong for what was happening in this room right now. Sloane, her name again, but different this time. Stripped of everything. Professional, everything careful, everything managed. Just her name the way I'd said it in my head 1,000 times when no one could hear. I need you to understand something. Everything I did, finding those records, checking those filings, sitting in that parking garage at 5 in the morning, trying to decide whether I had the right to tell you. I stopped, steadied myself. It wasn't because of the job. The room was absolutely silent. She looked up at me with those green eyes that had no idea what they did to a person. I know, she whispered. And before I could figure out what to do with any of it, a knock landed on the bridal suite door. 3 sharp, controlled knocks, and a voice came through it that made every muscle in Sloane's body go rigid. A voice that was supposed to be sitting across from 2 detectives. A voice that had no business being on the other side of that door. Sloane, I know you're in there. We need to talk, right now. Donovan Chase had not gone. Quietly. If this story is gripping your heart the way I think it is, do not move. Scene 3 is coming, and it is the scene that changes everything. For Cole, for Sloane, and for Donovan, who is about to discover that the woman he underestimated has been 10 steps ahead of him this entire time. But before we get there, if you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. Every week we bring you emotional cinematic stories that pierce the heart and stay with you long after the screen goes dark. This community is built for people who feel deeply, and we want you in it. Nobody moved. Not me. Not Sloane. Not the ivory curtains hanging still in the morning light like they were holding their breath alongside us. Donovan's voice came through the door again, smoother this time, recalibrated. The voice of a man who had talked his way out of everything his entire life and had no reason to believe today would be different. Sloane, I can explain everything. Just open the door. I looked at her, and what I saw on her face was not fear, not panic, not the crumbling expression of a woman caught off guard by the man who had lied to her for 14 months while sleeping next to her and planning a future built entirely on theft. What I saw was patience. Cold, prepared, absolute patience. She reached into the small ivory clutch sitting on the vanity table and pulled out her phone, typed one single text message, set it back down. Then she smoothed the front of her wedding dress with both hands, lifted her chin, and looked at me with those green eyes that had undone me completely. Open it, she said quietly. Sloane, open the door, Cole, please. I crossed the room and turned the handle. Donovan Chase filled the doorway in a navy suit, jaw tight, eyes already calculating. He was handsome the way certain dangerous things are handsome. polished on the surface, hollow underneath. His gaze moved from me to Sloane, and something shifted in his expression when he saw her standing there in the wedding dress. Something that looked almost like relief, like he still believed he could fix this with the right combination of words. He had no idea what he had walked into. "Baby," he started, stepping inside. "Whatever you think you found, I need you to let me." "Rebecca Howell," Sloane said. He stopped. "Asheville, North Carolina." She tilted her head. 14 months ago, a Tuesday. It rained." The color left his face in a single clean sweep. "You have been in my home," Sloane continued, her voice never once rising above a conversational tone, which was somehow more devastating than screaming. "You have sat at my table. You have touched everything my mother and I built from nothing after she worked herself to the bone, so I would never have to beg anyone for anything." She took one step forward. "And you thought you could walk into this room and explain that away." Donovan opened his mouth. The door behind him opened wider. Two people in plain clothes stepped in with badges already out, and behind them, Sloane's attorney, Margaret Osei, in a charcoal blazer and an expression that said she had been waiting for this moment with great personal satisfaction. Donovan turned, looked at the badges, looked back at Sloane, and for the first time since I'd known him, he had absolutely nothing to say. "That text I sent," Sloane said softly, "was telling them he was here." They walked him out, and when the door closed behind them and the room went quiet, Sloane Whitfield stood alone in her wedding dress in a bridal suite full of flowers that had outlasted the lie they were bought to celebrate, and she exhaled, long and slow and all the way to the bottom. I didn't say anything. I just walked to where she was standing and stood beside her, not 3 steps behind, beside her. And she turned and looked at me the way she'd never let herself look at me before. "What do we do now?" she asked. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in 5 years, I didn't look away. "We start," I said, "from right here, from the truth." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and took my hand. Not the way a boss takes an assistant's hand, not gratitude, not professionalism, the way someone holds on to something they almost lost before they even had it. We stood there together in the light pouring through those tall windows, the Atlanta skyline stretched out before us, two people who had spent 5 years being careful, finally choosing to be honest. And the flowers. Around us, those ivory peonies and white ranunculus and garden roses that had no ceremony to attend, filled the room with a fragrance that for the rest of my life I would associate with the exact moment I stopped being invisible. Some love stories begin with grand gestures and perfect timing. Ours began with a zipper, a whisper, and a truth that neither of us was brave enough to say until the day everything else fell away. But sometimes that's exactly what it takes. Sometimes you don't find love in the perfect moment. You find it in the broken one. Here is the question I want you to sit with tonight. Have you ever loved someone in silence, standing close enough to help them, but afraid to say the one true thing that could change everything between you? Have you ever protected someone's heart while quietly breaking your own? Drop your answer in the comments below. Tell us where in the world you are watching this right now and what time it is there, because stories like this, one deserve to be felt across every time zone, every continent, and every heart that has ever loved someone from 3 steps behind. And if this story moved you, if it cracked something open inside your chest, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the notification bell. Because every single week, we bring you stories that remind you that love, loss, and healing are not just things that happen to other people. They are happening to all of us. And you deserve to feel every word.